I call the March 8th meeting of the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission to order.
Bang your gavel again.
Call it to order. Can you hear me now?
Good.
Anyway, I call the March 8th meeting of the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission to order. Can we have our announcements, please?
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. Copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby of this conference room. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representative to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please write your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the lobby. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please sign in on that same sheet. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available in the lobby. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to district court.
Okay. We have no minutes to approve. We have no cases under number 2, which are considerations by the subdivision committee. We have 2 items under number 3, public hearing vacation items. The first vacation item is 2018, number 4, city vacation of a platted access controls to facilitate truck access and loading and unloading operations on site. Anybody on the commission like to hear that one?
Mr. Chairman, I'll have to abstain from that item.
Okay. Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Seeing none, we can take that by consent. Item 3-2, vacation 218, number 5, city vacation of platted access controls to modify access onto properties for future commercial development. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear the item? Seeing none, we can take that by consent. Do we have a motion on 3-1 and 3?
Approve 3-1,
Second.
3-1, 3-2?
3-1.
And who second?
Indeed.
Okay. And we have an abstention by Bill Johnson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Move to
Item,
approve 3-2.
Second.
got it? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving right on. Public hearings. Case number 2017-00041. Anybody wish to hear that item on the commission? Anybody in the audience wish to hear it? Okay, we'll hear that item. Case number 5, 2017 00044. A city conditional use for a parking area for a church on property zone single family 5. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Okay, we'll take that
We
back.
have somebody back here that,
Where? You're requesting it, sir? So, well, if you don't want to hear it, we'll pass it by consent. Okay. We'll take that by consent.
He said he wanted to give a speech, is what he said. Oh, he did? Yeah.
Oh,
Not want to give a speech.
no, he said he did not.
He did not.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, I got the hearing aids. Okay, we'll take that by consent. Item number 6, 2018 quadruple 04. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience? Okay, we'll take that by consent. Item number 7, which is 2018 quadruple 05. Anybody? Yes, we'll hear that item. Item number 8, 2018 number 9.
We will hear that.
we're gonna hear that one.
Yeah.
Number 8, which is 2018 number 9. Anybody will hear that one? Mr. Foster. Okay, item number 9, which is case number CUP 2018 quadruple 05. Anybody wish to hear that on the commission? Okay, seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Can you all follow along on which items we're asking for? Okay, thank you. We'll take that by consent. Okay, number 9, we're taking by consent. Okay, number 10, which is zoning case 2018-quadruple 03. It's a city rezoning from SF5 single-family residential to LC commercial. Anybody wish to hear that item? We will hear that item. Item number 10, which is zoning case 2018 quadruple 04 and 2018 quadruple 07. Anybody?
It's number 11.
Number 11. Yeah, anybody wish to hear that? And we have,
I got to abstain from that.
but no one wants to hear it. Anybody in the audience wish to hear it? Item number 11. We'll take that by consent individually. Moving right along, item number 12, which is zoning case 2018, number 5. Anybody wish to hear that on the commission? Mr. Foster will hear that. Item 13, a zoning case 2018 quadruple 06 and CUP 2018, number 4. Anybody wish to hear that on the commission? Anybody in the audience wish to hear number 13? Seeing none, we'll take that by consent. Item number 14, which is zoning case 2018 quadruple 07. That's a city zone change from B multifamily residential to GC general commercial. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anyone in the audience wish to hear number 14? We'll take, did you want to hear that? Okay, and we'll take number 14 by consent. And number 15 we will hear. Okay, so can we have a motion on 5, 6, 9, we'll skip 11, 13, and 14?
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Ms. Miles, seconded, okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, item number 11.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Mr. Richardson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. So we'll move on to case number 4, right? Who's presenting? Kathy?
Kathy Miles.
Was this
Good
a
afternoon. I'm
this
sorry.
question, or did somebody want to hear this?
There is something that the applicant wishes to add for consideration under the conditions that staff recommended.
But we'll hear it.
Sorry. You all have seen this case before. I'm sorry, Kathy Morgan for the Planning Department. This was a conditional use that was approved in 2016, as noted in your staff report. And they had originally requested vehicle and light truck sales. They've requested an amendment to allow boat and trailer sales on that site. And as part of that, this is located on East First there at the 135 overpass. You can see the outline on the aerial here. As part of that, this is an appropriate use. It's in the new development, that type of thing. So it does meet the criteria for the community investment plan. The original conditional use did not allow display north of this lot 38. And that's what is written in the recommendations in this staff report, is that they can expand the conditional use to include the boat and trailer sales, but to keep the same parking requirements, that only display can be south of 38 and over lot 38 and over in this area. This is looking at the business looking northwest at the site, and you can see 135 elevated here in the background. This is the parking area that's in question as to how much of that is to be allowed for display and sales, and what of it is employee parking. This is looking back northeast at the site. This is from the cul-de-sac when right-of-way was purchased for 135. Minneapolis Street was turned into a cul-de-sac, and there's no access to First Street from Minneapolis. They have since vacated this portion and truncated the cul-de-sac to up in this area. So all of this area that you're seeing in this photo is owned by the auto shop, car sales shop. This is the residential area to the north. As you can see, they have a concrete wall as required per the conditional use 2016-09. This is looking south at the exit ramp onto First Street from 135. And so staff would recommend that the Planning Commission approve the additional changes to the request on general provision I'm sorry, I grabbed the wrong thing. To approve the changes for the addition of boat and trailer sales as identified in your staff report, and I'll answer any questions.
Do you have any questions for staff? Mr. Richardson.
So, right now, the staff's recommending that display be kept south of Lot 38.
Yes.
Can you show us on the pictures where that might be, Kathy?
Okay.
You had some
This is
other-
the area you're looking at. This wall is at the north end of the property. Let me go back to the, okay, so this was the wall where you were looking, and the building is at the north end of Lot 38, if you can kind of see. So Lot 38 would come off the building across this way. And so, let's
You
see.
had some pictures of the parking lot there someplace.
Yeah. Okay. So lot 38 would be off the corner of the building right here, and everything north of that would be employee parking. South of this line is where they can have their display of auto sales.
Thank you.
You're recommending what the applicant would like?
I'm recommending that the conditional use only allow for the change of the addition of boat and trailer sales. They are amending conditional use 2016-09, which did not have boat and trailer sales. And it specified that there would be no display parking north of lot 38 in that original condition.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Seeing none, agent or applicant, you have 10 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Good afternoon. Levi Bond with Caw Valley Engineering, 200 North Emporia Street, Suite 100. Agent for the applicant, Darren Campbell. He's in the room if you have questions for him later. We are in agreement with staff comments except for conditions 3 and 6. Condition 3 was no outdoor display of cars for sales or cars waiting for repair is allowed north of Lot 38, Block 1, Minneapolis Edition. This was the original requirement in the first conditional use case. When I talked to Kathy, the reason it hadn't been changed yet is just because the application didn't specifically ask for that area to be included in the expanded sales area. It's properly screened, and we have an 8-foot fence all around that area, metal and masonry fence. Condition 6 was a 6 to 8 foot tall wood fence shall be erected around the property where is adjacent or abutting residential zone properties. Metal panel is not an acceptable screening material. We would like for the metal panel to be an acceptable material, as we believe it's easier to maintain, isn't damaged by weather as easily as wood, and it can match the building and be more aesthetically pleasing. We would ask that both of these conditions be removed from the conditional use and then the conditional use be passed. Be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Questions for the applicant? Mr. Richardson.
So in your original application, though, you did not ask for parking north of Lot 38, is that correct?
We originally put in an application for an adjustment, and then in the amendment application, I do not know if it was on there or not. I do not believe it was. Kathy? It was not on the amendment application. It was on the adjustment. It was just an
And
oversight.
I guess I have a question. Can we hear that if it was not in the application?
Sorry.
Since you're having a public hearing, I think any of the conditions are open for discussion.
Any other questions?
Question I have is on the map that we have, lot 38, 40, 42, 44, and 46. And 44 and 46 is basically right where the corner of the building is. Is that enough to drive around that corner? Because boats are pretty large. versus a car. And so I see that you're pretty much restricted just to 38 and 40.
Yes, it will be, as we had vacated that cul-de-sac. Do we have a picture down there?
So that last one you were just at.
Is
So
that,
that's a picture looking north while you're on First Street. As you can see, there's plenty of room to maneuver a boat through there or cars.
So if you can go back two slides, and I'll show you what I'm looking at. Right there. So the corner of the building is right there. And so is that enough parking for 44 and 42 to put a boat there? Or is it pretty much locking you in at 38, 40, and 42 to only be able to put a boat or for sale boat?
So you're just asking about displaying in that
Yeah,
area?
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we don't want to pin down where display is. We would like it to be open so he can adjust the cars and boats as needed. He wouldn't put he wouldn't put boats right there and not allow traffic through that.
Right. That's what I was concerned with.
But with the cul-de-sac being vacated, if he didn't display right in 44 and 45 and block himself in, there's more than enough room for traffic flow and for boats to be towed through there.
But if you had all the way to 30, then you would have more for boats.
Yeah.
And so you wouldn't have to have that restriction right
Yes,
down there.
and if we went all the way up to 30, this was a metal chain link fence that's here that you can see is visible from 135, so he could display around this area.
I see.
Any other questions?
A question. Do you have a picture of the fence there on the north end of lot 30? Is the fence already there? That's the wall that's already there.
That's existing.
That picture's the north end of 30, right? Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So you'll be basically behind that metal fence with your boats. You wouldn't be out in front.
Correct. We would not be in that cul-de-sac.
So you still will be behind that masonry wall.
Correct. There'd be proper screening for the entire property.
Any other questions for the agent or applicant? Seeing none, anyone in the audience like to speak on this matter? Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no speakers, we will bring it back to the commission. Mr. Warren.
Move to approve, eliminating conditions number 3 and 6.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Warren, second by Mr. Green. Now I can see his name.
Thank you, Admiral.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. Moving on to case number 7. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Dave here out with planning staff. This is conditional case 1805, request for a cell tower on property at 707 West 13th Street. Before we get into the full presentation, and there's handout material in front of you, at the DAB meeting on Monday, there had been comments made about a Kansas law that's on the books that has impacts regarding the restrictions that local governments have regarding the approval process on any cell towers. That law also covers now the requirement that all cities and counties in Kansas make the public right-of-way and streets available for the what's called the small cell or the distributed antenna systems as well. But among the things that it does, it lists 18 restrictions that are in effect now for evaluation of tower cases. And I put this up. There's a handout available out in the hallway too. I'm not going to read all of them, but these are things 1 through 18 on these 2 slides that are basically topics or issues that local governments are not supposed to use as part of its approval evaluation for the tower. There are restrictions on what can be taken into account. For those of you who recall the tower in southeast part of the county last fall, there was discussion about possibly imposing and placing additional lighting requirements on that tower. One of the things that's listed there in number 6, you're not allowed locally to impose things differently than what the FAA requires. And so these things are there only because now, does it say, or these prohibit counties from denying requests? No. But these are factors that cannot be part of a basis for an action going forward. And I wanted to put this into the record here so that you have that information available to you, as well as anyone else that's interested. And that is the Kansas statute, Chapter 66, Section 2819, that's now the law in the book regarding this. This particular case is located here on the south side of 13th Street. This is the little Arkansas River that surrounds it on the east and south side. For anyone not aware, this is Meads Island. You'll see that on the aerial photo. This is the zoning in the area. The property in question is zoned LC, limited commercial, as is all the property along the south side of 13th Street from the little river to east of Bidding Avenue. This is an aerial photo showing the property, its location. You can see 13th Street and the bridge. This is North High School, and here is the river, and of course, Meads Island. This is the location in relationship to the overall comprehensive plan. It is an area that's essentially identified in the plan generically for residential use in the future. It is within what's considered the established central area of the city. This is a sketch drawing of the proposed layout of how the tower is proposed to be located. It would be occurring within the 30 by 55 foot fenced area along the very east edge of the property. For orientation purposes, the river is right here to the east of the location. There's an access easement coming off the driveway on 13th Street down to the proposed location. This is an aerial photo at the site. I'm looking roughly at the location where the tower would be located on the property. I'm in adjacent interior on the property. This is the edge. You can see the tree line here. The river is just beyond that, and you can see in the background North High School. This is the location kind of looking south from 13th Street. The tower location would be roughly in this area. And you can see again trees around the property to the south and the east side. This is the home that's on the south side of 13th Street that is zoned LC on the same general property, but this is what is immediately to the west of the site. And then this is on the north side of 13th Street looking southeast. You can see the bridge across 13th Street, the Municipal Ridge. This is a picture of the tower that is north of North High School that was approved about 12 years ago. This is a 150-foot lattice tower that exists now north of North High School. The staff report outlines the findings and substance of the evaluation under the same criteria and policies that we have used on the numerous tower cases that have come forward over the last several months. The conclusion is that this one is no different than any of the others that we're dealing with, and the recommendation within the staff report is for approval. The same conditions are attached. I do note within the staff report that this is in an area where a number of historically significant properties are on the register or are eligible. Within the evaluation materials that have come to the city, the city has already placed on record through Kathy Morgan, our historic preservation planner, a written letter to the, under, what is it, the 106? Section 106 evaluation back to the agency handling that on behalf of the applicant, that would have a significant impact on historic properties. So there is a written objection on record through that agency. It will be subject to further reviews by other federal and state agencies under that criteria that are above and beyond what we're doing with the zoning case, which is what the only issue is today. One of the conditions of recommendation of approval is that the permit, if granted, would be subject to the applicant obtaining and maintaining any other applicable federal and state permits. So if there was a subsequent denial by another state or federal agency, this case, a local approval would become null and void. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Yes, John?
Could you point out on that aerial where the historic home is and where the other eligible houses are?
For the historic, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
you mentioned that there was one historical home already registered.
No, not,
Did
no, they're not.
you say that, or?
No, I did not say that, no. There are other historic designations in the area. I'll let Kathy go.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. The Manissa Bridge is locally listed. It is potentially eligible for listing in the state and national registers, as is North High School is locally listed and potentially eligible for listing. You have the bidding local historic district, state historic district, and national register district just south of the location here. This is where you see the dark outline properties. There are homes in this area that are eligible for listing. The historic district, the Park Place Fairview Historic District, is over to on the right side of your map here in this black outline. These properties within the neighborhoods, these black outline properties are listed historic properties. This area is one of the early neighborhoods of Wichita, so we have a lot of potentially eligible properties that were built between 1890 and 1935, which is the area of significance for this neighborhood.
Well, whoever can answer this, there used to be a trailer park there right along the river. Does that still exist, or are they trailers gone, or what? They're probably historic.
Yes.
Are you talking in here?
Right along the river itself. From the river up to where the buildings, and I know some of them taken out, but is it all open land? Are there any trailers in and around this?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. You'll have to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Foster?
Kathy, I think this question is for you. In the staff report on page 2, it mentions a copy of the letter of response from the Wichita Historic Preservation Officer is attached. I could not find that letter in my staff information.
sorry.
Would really like to see that response.
Okay. I will get that and get that to you.
I would like to remind the audience that they'll have their time to talk, and it's not appropriate to talk at this time. Thank you.
I do have further questions unless
ahead.
someone else does. Dave, I appreciate you getting us this list from KSA 66-2019. So what I want to confirm after reading the wireless communication master plan, on page 5, it states, the Wichita Unified School District microwave data and phone system is also included in the public service category, and there likely will be substantial opportunities for wireless communication facility co-location on school towers that should limit the need for constructing as many more new wireless communication facilities. Based upon the statute, is that statement negated from the wireless plan?
Yes.
Yes, if you look at the list of items, that's now one of the things that we're restricted from is basically talking about co-location issues and all of those factors.
Okay, let me check another one with you here.
Dave, could you stand by the microphone?
This is on page 32, item D, National Environmental Protection Act regulations. Potential environmental impacts are as follows, which would be included in an environmental assessment. Facilities that may affect districts, sites, buildings, structures, or objects significant in American history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, or culture that are listed or are eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Is that statement negated as well?
That's accurate. That is the letter that Kathy wrote to the FCC, who was the responsible party for conducting that review.
Okay, so that still stands as a consideration for this application. Okay. I just got one more here.
In your limit.
I've been gone for a while. I've been saving up.
Go right ahead, sir.
This comes from the application information for a tower. It says a notarized statement from a wireless communication provider that they conducted an analysis of available co-location opportunities on existing wireless support structures and intend to locate on the wireless communication facility if it is approved. Is that statement negated from the application requirements?
That's the modified statement that does comply with the statute. Previously, we required documentation in the form of radio frequency propagation maps and an analysis of potential co-location. That was removed from that statement. We still can require that there be a communication need identified by the provider. We just can't get the details of what that need is. But we can require them to say that they need the tower for them to locate.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Dave? Dave, I have a question for you. Can you
Yes,
go
sir.
back to the site plan, the overall site plan, and show me on the north, no, the one showing the whole area with the North High School? Keep going.
Which one are we talking about, Joe?
One that has the whole site for north, the zoning map.
Zoning map.
Okay, can you show me on that site about where the 150-foot tower is at North High School?
It's located approximately in this location.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dave? Thank you, Dave. At this time, we'll take comment from the audience. Who would like to be first?
Let's look at.
Oh, yeah, why don't we do that?
We know what he's gonna say.
Dave was doing such a good job, I forgot all about the applicant.
I guess I got it up here. Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Greg Ferris. I represent APC Towers and T-Mobile in a tower case that's before you. Thought I'd take a moment to give you a little background. I started doing these about 2000, 2001. When we first started this, some of you were probably around at that time and remember we were doing 150 to 190 foot towers. They were located almost exclusively in industrial and commercial areas because they were what they're called coverage sites. They were just trying to cover the entire city. So they built them all over the place just to cover everything. In those days, those search rings were anywhere from a half mile to a mile in diameter. So that meant we could look for sites anywhere in that half mile to mile area. As we progressed and got coverage pretty well built out where you had the city basically covered, they went to more capacity coverage sites. And those sites came down. They were 120, 140 feet tall, and you've probably seen some of those recently. I had one a couple years ago that we did on Kellogg, and one we did over at Rock Road. It was a 120-foot tower. Well, now we're really getting into what they call the cell split phase of communication, and that's where they're really trying to provide situations where there's areas where they can provide enough data, enough usage so that in the future, these sites will be able to be used by everybody in the community. These search rings now are down to a quarter mile. I actually have one search ring that's 580 feet in diameter. I told them, forget it. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to find something in that diameter. But in this case, this search ring was around a quarter of a mile. And so my job then is to go into that quarter mile and try to find something that's suitable. The actual ring was over here. And what you can see over there is lots of houses. Well, makes sense because what they're trying to do is provide service to the residential community, so search rings end up in houses. Well, as I looked around, I said, we're not going to put it here, so I started looking slightly outside that ring. That ring ended about right here. So anything beyond that, I needed to get special permission. We did because this was a commercial area, so we looked at that. We did evaluate Manisa Park. Wireless plan does ask us to do that. We didn't do Manisa Park because there really isn't any tree coverage, and I think the objection would be even greater if we were to put this in there, and there was nothing to really hide this from the area immediately to the west of it. We looked at Oak Park, and it was evaluated, but we have antennas directly across the River Boulevard from Oak Park, and so that was rejected as a site. Virtually everything else in the area was either residential churches. There is a school in the area, John Marshall. So it's a relatively small piece of ground. And in that particular area, we felt like, or at least I felt like, that would have a bigger impact on the residential than if we actually moved outside that residential area. So we also looked at the commercial area, and that commercial area is all of this property here. And we took that commercial area and moved it as far away as we possibly could from any of the residential that would be impacted. Also picked an area that was most wooded so that the tower itself could be most shielded. Had some professionally done photo simulations. This is a site from 13th Street. This shows the trees, the 100-foot tower. This is the neighborhood that is closest in proximity, even though it probably doesn't have the same view line. It is the closest area. When they did the photo sim, they had to blow it up because when it's green, you won't see it at all, but you can hardly see it even with the trees that are there now. And then the site from North High, which is one of the predominant historical features, so I had them shoot that as well. I think it's important to recognize that the neighborhood that Kathy referred to immediately to the south, the historical area, you'll look and you will see these 65 to 70-foot tall power poles running up and down the street. Now, Westar can put those anywhere they want. They have no height restrictions. They have no landscaping requirements, no buffering. And as you can see, those are basically monopoles right there in the neighborhood. That is a much greater impact than what we're proposing. If I could go back just a second, I think another important aspect as you see here, is the string of power poles that go down 13th Street. And as you look and you see, this is again very much a predominant feature in that area. Again, I didn't believe that there would be as much impact based on what was already there. You asked about what is there in that neighborhood. There's a non-conforming These are the non-conforming structures you were talking about, sir. You can see they're still there. This is what's there today. So again, this is what's immediately adjacent to the river today. We're going to clean up a little bit of that area. We're going to buffer it. We're going to plant some, we're going to build a wood fence that keeps it from having the impact. The FCC has determined that local governments should approve an application for a wireless carrier when the location is needed by the applicant and there are no other alternatives to the applicant. This has nothing to do with state law. This is the FCC's regulations on how they approach this. One thing I can assure you, there's never been a wireless carrier that built a site they didn't need. These things cost $200,000 to $400,000 depending on how many radio equipments they have to install. They do not put these where they don't need them. And they only put them where they need them and try to make it the most efficient that they can. I believe I've conducted an exhaustive search. You might want to talk about North High. Somebody at the DAB meeting said, you know, well, you'll cover North High from there. That was not our intent. If North High gets covered, that's fine. You know, our intent is to cover the residential area to the west. If North High happens to get extra coverage as a result of it, that's fine. But to try to cover a school where kids don't need to use their phone or aren't supposed to use their phones has not ever been in T-Mobile's marketing plan. But where houses can use that phone when they need it or for their communications needs, that is in their immediate plan. We believe the area has already had an introduction of monopoles through the electric poles in the neighborhood. We believe the river's had an impact with the tower already constructed at North High. And based on the information, we believe that this application should be approved. And I think it should be approved regardless of state law. I really didn't use state law in my consideration and never really have. I always use Policy 10 as my consideration for approval. The character of this neighborhood truly is a mixed use. There's residential, there's commercial, there's non-conforming uses, and there's institutional uses. It truly fits the definition of a mixed-use area. The closest house is 300 feet on the other side of the river, and I think I was pretty darn close to that where I shot the photo, where the photo sim was done from. And you can see that it will not have an impact visibly from that neighborhood. Also believe that the removal will not have any impact on nearby property, and here's why. There have been hundreds, literally hundreds of studies in property values done by, not by the wireless industry, by other industries that have looked to see whether or not. Now, somebody could stand up and say, in fact, I had somebody call me and say, hey, you know, I'm not sure I want this near me because of, can't build houses next to it. So I sent them to the property immediately across the street from the zoo. You might be familiar with that. Those $300,000 houses that were built immediately after a tower was built, not before, the tower didn't go in after. The tower, painted red and white, is right there adjacent, 150-foot tall tower, did not affect their property values or their desire to build houses in that area. So we don't believe with the buffering that exists it will have a negative impact. We think there's a very large gain to public health, safety, and welfare. 65% of households no longer use a landline. They are dependent on cell phone coverage and their ability to use a cell phone anywhere and anytime they can in their house. Beyond that, many people are now, that's their only form of internet access. So we believe that it is in the public's welfare to have these towers and have them where they're needed. I think this does conform with the wireless plan for the majority of it. Nothing I've ever done complies with 100% of it. And finally, there is no impact on community facilities because we really have very little impact on that. The last thing I would say is I just want to address real quickly the historical issues. These issues are dealt with not at the local level as part of zoning. That is really not a consideration. It's in the wireless plan because it refers to the NEPA. We have to do a NEPA, and then we have to have that NEPA, and your approval today is contingent upon getting that National Environmental Protection Act done. And so we have to go through that process. We also are going through the SHPO process, which is the State Historic Preservation Office. So we're going through that process now. If that's denied, the tower will be denied. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Mr. Ferris? We will May have some later.
Okay, I'll stand by.
Okay, now
Oh.
we can, oh, you had a question.
Well, no, we got this letter handed to us, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't, if anybody has any question, I've got a question about it. It's written by Kathy Morgan on Planning Department stationery and recommending that it go someplace else. It looks like there's a conflict here in some way. Can you help us there with?
Well, I'll rely on Kathy, but basically, I think what is, the 106 review is something that's done by the FCC. It is under their jurisdiction. However, she is authorized as the preservation planner to make comments about the historic resources in the area for the application. So the planning department nor MAPC would be involved in any of the reviews. We just were providing her comments that she has submitted for the record so that there would be full disclosure. Is that accurate, Kathy?
So that's the SHPO process that I referred to. That
I understand that, but the letter says they're recommending that the pole be moved, and the staff report is recommending that it be allowed. That's why I'm saying, it looks like we have a.
The difference between zoning and history.
Wait a minute, I don't think, you're not asking Greg this question, are you?
Oh,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that is, because it's two different deals.
Okay.
They're not connected, and that's, in my mind, there is no conflict.
Okay.
She's doing what she needs to do as a preservation planner, and staff is doing what we need to do based on the wireless plan.
Okay.
Okay. I'd asked for questions before. Is there any additional ones? Okay. Let's go to the audience for public comment. Who would like to be first?
Seeing none.
Seeing none. Sorry.
My name is Lori Leap. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Lori Leap. My husband Leroy and I own a home at 1739 Farrell Drive. We haven't registered it on the historical. And right now my sister, who's there, is occupying that home. This neighborhood, I moved to it in 1988 when I married my husband. And it is an incredible neighborhood. It has changed, and mostly for the better. And that little area there was quite quaint, I thought. It had those little mobile homes there. And this lady that lived there, she worked for the state for many, many years. And those people that lived in that little area, they had access, a cheaper home and access to all the things they needed. And it's went down like mobile homes parks do. They're discarded like old people and animals. But I do not see why that we need another mobile home. We had a cheapy cell phone there for many years, my husband and I. We never had any trouble. We had a hard line also. But I wonder who these people are that don't have access. If you want to know about access on T-Mobile, I'm a good person to ask. Driving across Wyoming and having a blowout, 100 miles of nothing between Laramie and Rock Springs. The only thing that saved us was the state patrol. And you can get emergency with a cell phone. There's no bars, but you still can get help. So, and with North High, why is that? I mean, it's just right there, right across from each other. I don't understand why we need more. And I think, Mr. Ferris, that you should provide a list of all these people that was stated in the paper, which actually brought my attention to it.
Ma'am, could you direct your comments to the commission who will be hearing this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I don't know why we couldn't ask him questions, but that's fine. That must not be in your protocol. But I don't know why that we haven't been presented with a list of these people who are complaining about not getting 911. Yes, that is important, but they can. We don't need any more service there. And my sister has a list of all the a map of how many T-Mobile phones are there. We have towers, 13 towers in this city. Would you like, if she can bring it up and show you, she can also show you how much money they make over the country off of it. And is my 3 minutes up? I will I'll ask her to come up here and show you her research that we spent all afternoon yesterday doing on this cell phone situation.
Oh, thank you. Next speaker. You need to state your name and address.
My
but
name's
then-
Susie Cunningham, and I live right across this river there. I'm at 1329 Llewellyn. And I do think property values are going to be affected. I know our view is going to be affected. I have to challenge the picture because we had some architects do another drawing, and it's much higher. That riverbank over there has been recently purchased by an architect, and then the resident landscape architect has bought all the ones that were rentals. Landscaping has already begun, much expense. I know the interior of my 1919 house is completely redone, and it's all original woodwork. I've got a $20,000 contract on the outside of it right now, and they're all coming up. But when this sort of thing happens, it really becomes sort of demotivating. Not even sure if I want to stay there. The surveys and the research that he mentioned was done by the appraisal industry, not related to the cell phone industry. The ones that I presented at DAP are used in legal cases all over the country where neighbors have complained and the applications have been denied. And these two different surveys and studies that I have represented here in the packet, I'm one of the ones that brought you the packet, they were compared by the National Association of Realtors, and then their results were published in Realtor Magazine. You have to know that that's not a fly-by-night organization. In it, it was said that of 1,000 responders, all of them active buyers, 89% said they wouldn't live near a cell phone tower. 94% said that the nearby tower would impact their buying decision, and if they did make an offer, it could be as much as 20% less. That means not just the little houses that you think are worthless will be affected. This quarter-mile radius will affect houses up to $300,000. And you count the income that you're going to make in taxes off that cell tower. It might be offset by what you lose individually from all the different residents. Also, KSA 66-2019, I read it. I don't know how many of you read it. Every indication that I read, it referred to public property and public right-of-way, and I can't see where it's relevant. I sent it to an attorney to have it read, but I only got it on Wednesday. It's only been a couple of days.
Your time is up.
Okay.
Can you conclude real quick? Any questions?
I have a question for.
Mr. Blick? Ma'am, can you go back to the podium? Mr. Blick has a question for you.
Thank you. Question I have for you is, you were saying you live right across the river. Do you have a landline in your house, or do you use a cell phone?
I use Wi-Fi on a cell phone, on a smartphone, because we don't need it. That's the other thing is that was left out. A lot of people
So you
do
use
that.
a cell phone? So
I
do
use
you
a-
see with the statement was brought up earlier, it says, with the increase of cell phone usage in neighborhoods versus landlines are starting to go away. Do you see the importance of safety? Do you think it is a safety
No,
thing, or do you?
I have T-Mobile, all 6 of us in the family, all over this end, grandkids and kids. They told us when we bought it at the store and and when we ordered the service that we would have good coverage there, and we do. Old phones don't work too good on higher speeds, but we have had no problem. But also a smartphone flips over and runs on Wi-Fi, any Wi-Fi that's, so, it's not just aerial cell signals.
Okay.
We have Cox cable.
Sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other questions for the
Anything
speaker?
else?
Yes, Mr. Daly.
If your cell phone in the future starts blacking out sometimes and you can't get reception because there's too much demand, is that going to bother you?
Well, since they're trying
That's a
to,
yes or no question.
I guess down the road,
So, and that's why they're building towers, is for capacity, not for outreach, is for capacity. So I just wanted you to be aware of that.
I have Cox cable.
Mr. Warren has a question.
I'm guessing by your testimony here that your objection isn't necessary to this location specifically, but anything that would fall within the quarter-mile radius?
Oh,
You don't
no,
want,
I'm for cell towers. I just think this particular one on the river corridor, when we've never done that
well,
before.
if we would find a spot closer to the homes, I mean, it's a pretty small area, so if it was closer to the homes, that would be,
There's lots of LC up on 18th Street.
Please move over.
thank you.
I'm sorry. I just wanted you closer to the mic.
Okay, sorry.
I think you're okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none? Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm Madeline McCullough. I live at 810 Shady Way, 2 doors down from the proposed site. My first question is, where is the community focus? The proposed tower would create problems that could be quite costly later to address. The Center Wichita Places for People initiative is designed to revitalize the city center neighborhoods. By denying this conditional use permit, MAPC will help property owners in Riverside, North Riverside, Midtown, maintain our property values, which in turn maintains the health of the core of our city, which is the plan we're working on right now. When infrastructure development is guided by individual desires, instead of a more civic approach, what does the community actually need, options on existing towers, micro towers, stealth options, camouflage church steeples, things like that, are not even considered. In this case, the property owner has no incentive to find a more suitable alternative. Because of this, the citizens of Riverside look to you, our governing boards, the city of Wichita, to help us protect our property values and the charm of our neighborhood. MAPC has the Wireless Communication Master Plan. It was updated May 2015, which is written to manage cell tower development. In regards to that plan, I would like to read number 1. Whereas competition is encouraged, almost unfettered, for most types of development, the city's and county's policy toward towers should be different in recognition of the objective to limit the number and visibility of towers in the community. That's on page 7. Number 2, burying equipment in an underground vault to keep most of the equipment out of sight may be necessary in environmentally sensitive locations such as historic landmarks, historic districts, and the river corridor. This site is all three of those. Number three, included in the wireless communication plan are criteria for new providers. That's what this is. I'll list the four of them. They should be mounted on top or side of a multi-story building or other structure. They can be on existing poles or street rights-of-way, on existing support structures, including those constructed for personal wireless service, AM/FM radio, and television broadcast, school district microwave antennas, and private dispatch systems. USD 259 is not going to be using their tower after August. I would propose that is something that we should look at seriously. I also think it's a completely different tower, that it is 500 feet from the riverbank rather than 100 feet from the riverbank. And fourth, at certain city and county-owned properties, this is where we should be looking, be identified and marketed as available. They may include multi-story buildings, water towers, park areas, sewer treatment plants. Have we looked at the water department facility behind the Wichita Art Museum? When requests, tiny bit more. When requesting a conditional use permit for a new ground-mounted wireless communication facility, the applicant should demonstrate that, one, there's no available space on existing or approved wireless communication facilities or other structures that can be utilized. I can't believe that there is none. And two, there's no other technically feasible opportunity to modify or rebuild an existing structure on which the communication equipment may be located. This is from your master plan. My question is, why do we have a master plan if we're not following it? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madeline. Any questions for the speaker? Can you take the mouse there and show me where you live? It's on the...
Oh, I can see here. Oh, duh. I'm being dumb. Yeah, that's my house right there. Can I say that when I bought this house, I considered it a legacy house. I bought the house for $65,000. I put in a $35,000 kitchen, and I just spent $20,000 on the backyard. I wouldn't spend that kind of money on this house if I'd known this tower was going in. This Shady Way is a street that faces the river. It's a beautiful little street full of houses that people spend a lot of money on.
Thank you.
You're not going to find that if this is built.
Any other questions? Seeing no other questions, next speaker, please.
Thank you all for the opportunity today. I'm Beth Harshfield, and I'm also a Riverside resident. In fact, I own 3 properties in Riverside, but I live at 1330 North Amadon, not on the map, but I do care. Both of my kids went to North High, and I am concerned that the effect of this monotower on the safety of the children walking along that path. This path is heavily used by these North High students before and after school, and I'm sorry, teens sometimes do crazy things, and they look for excitement in dangerous ways. And walking by this monopole every day during the construction phase, as well as once it's built, it classifies as an attractive nuisance, dangerous. And then there's also the rare conditions in Kansas where we have wind and ice. You know, if ice covers the crown and melts and falls, any person below, even outside of the required fencing, could be in mortal danger. I had someone tell me the other day that they work at where a monopole is, and when it gets icy and windy, their employer requests that they park 100 to 150 feet away so that their vehicle doesn't get damaged by the falling ice. Children don't have the protection of a vehicle. Let's make sense of these decisions. This could happen at this site. I'm also concerned about the negative impact on the visual and the historic. Historically, the city of Wichita has made some regrettable and very expensive decisions regarding how we handle our historic site and natural resources. We've torn down a castle in Riverside. We've let precious riverbanks go to questionable developments. 3 of Wichita's oldest residences and neighborhoods are in the core of this city. Riverside, North Riverside, and Midtown would suffer adverse effects from the proposed communication tower. These neighborhoods consider their charm and visual appeal to be their strongest asset. A 10-story communication tower would definitely detract from the visual appeal of the neighborhood and lower the neighborhood values, as my friend said. In the case of North High and Manissa Bridge, Kathy Morgan has gone through the significant historical areas. But if it's okay, Kathy, I'd like to read a section from the letter, if that's all right. The evaluation of the Wichita Historic Preservation Office is that the proposed 110-foot monopole will have an adverse effect on the properties listed in or eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places.
Your time is up.
I have one summary, if I could, sir.
Be great.
On behalf of everyone here today from the Riverside Citizens Association, we serve as representatives of the community, and we ask the following. We ask that you not grant this special use permit. We ask that you protect the investment the city has made in public spaces adjacent to this proposed site. We ask that you decide in favor of preserving 3 vital neighborhoods. We ask that you help homeowners in the area protect their biggest investment, their home. Development of this kind should not be taken lightly or determined by monetary criteria. We ask that you carefully weigh your vote and listen to the citizens you serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you. Next speaker? Or was that the summary for the speakers? Oh, okay. So it wasn't a total summary, huh?
Good afternoon. My name is Teddy McCullough, and I too live in Riverside. I've been there for 29 years. My home is not on this map, but I am affected by the environment because I travel on 13th Street every day, and my sister happens to live on Shady Way, and I enjoy her backyard space and the view that she has of the river. What I would like to address is some statements that are made in the pamphlet that you have from Ferris Consulting. I agree, the site is heavily buffered with trees, and many of the trees are 40 feet tall. However, according to the certified arborist who viewed the site we contracted with, there are 2 to 5 trees that are 75 to 80 feet tall. They are sycamore and cottonwood, and they have had no maintenance done on them because they grow by the river. The rest of the trees in the picture, and I wish I knew how to put the picture up here because I could show you, but there's a tree line underneath the 2 tall trees that you can see. That tree line is what's considered by certified arborists as a scrub trees. They're volunteer trees. They're mostly heavenwood trees. They are not maintained in any way, shape, or form, and since they're volunteers, they are not viable to grow tall enough to even come close to going halfway up the tower to conceal it from view. And they will provide poor coverage if that's what it's considered. Trees grow 6 to 18 inches a year, and mostly once the tree is mature, it grows larger, not taller. So it's a misnomer to think that these trees are going to actually someday grow tall enough to obstruct the view from any direction of this tower. When I asked the arborist in his professional opinion, the trees lining the river, will they provide adequate coverage of this 100-foot tower? He said, absolutely not. In the paper, it says that it will provide coverage, and us arborists said no. In Eastboro, what they have done is they have started putting I don't know the word, tower apparatus on the light poles. Yeah, we do. We have a lot of light poles in Riverside because we're an old neighborhood and they're not buried. My proposition is put them on the light poles that are already existing and don't mess with the river corridor that would affect the plan that you already have in front of you. And I believe that's all. Are there any questions?
Thank you for doing it very timely. Any questions? Seeing none, next speaker.
Thank you.
Oh, ma'am, I do have a question. Are you familiar with this rendering that was passed out to us?
Yes.
Are these the trees that you were talking about being 75 to 85 feet
There's
tall?
2 trees in the front you can see that are 75 to 80 feet tall. The rest of them are the scrub trees that are 30 feet tall.
Okay. And this was done by an architect?
Was not done by an architect. It was done by a volunteer from the DAB meeting. The measurement of the height of the 2 was done by was it done by an architect? Well, the arborist actually did the measuring of the trees. That was done professionally, yes.
Looks a little out of scale is all my comment. Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
There's another page in there where the arborist is actually quoted, which may, in the printing, that front one might have gotten exaggerated, but there's some with 4 on it, and that may show a better indicator of the tree to tower height. It's kind of towards the back of your packet. I've been told the 2 on the back side were drawn by an architect. Sorry, I didn't put the packets together. I don't know all of it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Next speaker, please.
Hello, Mark Haynes. I live at 1801 Woodrow, not on the map. I just wanted to point out a couple things. People spent a lot of time the other evening at the DAB meeting and discussed this at length. And there was a vote and it went 8-1 to not recommend this approval. So, I would voice that. And also in regards to that picture, if you take the peak of that house was measured at 16 feet that's in the picture. So if you just kind of like take a ruler or something, you can, take times 6 and that'll give you right around 100 feet. You just have to kind of figure that. And it looks like it might be a little taller in the rendition, but not by much. It's not what was in the original one that Mr. Ferris provided. So it's different. So I think that's all I got. I'm opposed to it, for aesthetic reasons. And also, the Mead Island there has historical and maybe prehistorical significance to our community too. So thank you. Any questions?
Questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
My name is Kathy Dittmer. I live at 823 Litchfield Street in central Riverside. I use the corridor on 13th and Bidding and Nims practically 15, 20 times a week. I am just here for a clarification. We have mentioned the cell tower that belongs, or the microwave tower that belongs to North and 259. It is our understanding that 259 is going to take down all their microwave towers and bury their lines. So they've seen the light. That's all I wanted to say.
Questions for Ms. Dittmer? Okay,
It's just not a viable resource at this time.
thank you. Do you have a question? Next speaker, please.
Okay, my name is Alan Trineri. I live at 1461 North Burns Street. I'm opposed to this because it's right there by Meade Island, and this is something that is very, very important to the Native Americans. My grandparents lived in owned, and my aunt lives in one of the original Stopper homes. It's 2424 South Stopper Street. I've come to Wichita my entire life. I was born in Oklahoma, down by where the earthquakes originate. That's causing all this, and I feel that there's a lot of things that happen that the unintended consequences to what will happen in the future are ignored, and the immediate profit, the short-sightedness of let's make some money right now. I also am under the impression that this is right on the very periphery of the area for being effective. I do not like that it's going into sandy soil. I'm pretty sure that where I live is on this map. It's not necessary. No, it isn't. I'm over like right about there. So I'm very close to this. I'll be able to see it. Oh, I can't believe this. Nobody calls until I'm up in front of a microphone.
Happens all the time.
I really do feel that there has to be another location that you can put this. This is being done in a short-term, quick profit, bums rush way. We're just going to shove it through in order to make somebody make some money off of it. I feel you could put this stuff on top of some of these tall power poles that are already in place. The tower at North High that is already in existence, so we knock it down, we put something else in the ground. I don't approve that it's going into sandy soil, and I really do feel that it's going to be disruptive to the wildlife, and the wildlife are very important to me. That's one of my main drivers in this whole debate, is how is it going to affect the wildlife. Then on another note, my mother had got the human metapneumovirus and spent 11 days in the hospital here recently. And they gave her this vest that was hooked up to a modem that had a cell phone that was attached to it. And whenever they put in meter Wi-Fi systems, or on the gas meter or on the electric meter, or we add in more computer Wi-Fi modems and stuff, it takes me a month to be able to fall asleep again. I feel these wavelengths going through the air, and I really would appreciate it if you could find another place to put it. And right there by Meade Island, it disrespects the Native Americans. I'm sorry. Thank you. Appreciate your time. I appreciate your service to the community, and I'm begging you to please reconsider putting it right there.
Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, next speaker.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name's Mike Wilson. I live at 828 Perry. First thing I'd like to share is something I shared at the last meeting, which was, in my opinion, we wouldn't be having a discussion like this if this was New York City and we're talking about Central Park. I hope that you people do right by the next generation, as our parents and stuff did for us when it came to preserving that area in the middle of our city and holding it with some sort of sanctity, instead of letting every opportunist or someone who's found themselves in a difficult real estate deal, compromise our community. Because Riverside serves everyone, not just the people in Riverside. These people are good enough to, and have enough interest to show up and try to protect it. I would also like to say, how did this even become a need? I'm a T-Mobile guy and have been for years, and I've never had any problem with service in Riverside. So I wonder how this need came up. I haven't heard a lot of complaints. Also, I don't think anybody's really addressed all these alternative sites, particularly the site at Marshall or North High. And they're not doing it because somebody's not making any money, looking elsewhere. And also Meade Island, I don't know if you guys know this, but in the 30s, some of the last remnants of the Wichita tribe came and built a grass hut on Meade Island. It's historically significant, and it would be detrimental to the natural habitat of that island to have that cell tower be disrupted to the wildlife. And I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker?
Sure. Anybody?
Seeing none, thank you.
Okay.
Next speaker. Any other speakers? Seeing none? Seeing none, we'll ask the applicant to come forward and has up to 2 minutes for rebuttal. Thanks. You never know.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. A couple things I'll raise real quickly. North High was evaluated. I actually work for the school district in trying to market their towers, so this would have been the first site that I looked at as someone who's looking in the area. We're already a little too far east. This tower, North High's towers, is another quarter mile, and as I mentioned earlier, we had a quarter-mile ring, so we're now almost over a half mile from where we originally were looking, so it really didn't meet the needs of what we were trying to accomplish. Even though that's not part of what the state law considers, I do it anyway. I always do that. I look for every other alternative that we can do because we talk about financial gain. I get paid whether it passes or not, but I always want to have it pass. So I always look for something that's easy because I don't have to go to as many meetings. So the economic advantage for me is to find the easy sites. As far as safety, the safety record for monopoles is second to none. Yes, you have a lot of issues when you talk about guy wires, those kind of things. When you see that this isn't even close to the walking path, it's considerable distance back. If there's an ice storm, the trees that are there are going to create a much bigger hazard. I would remind you that the photo sim I did was professionally done, taking consideration, and I estimated the trees at 40. With the arborist saying they're 70, that photo sim that I did really does make sense. We do not build these to be completely concealed by trees because then they don't work. When you look at the master plan, what we're trying to do is conceal as much as we can from the visual. So if you're looking up, yes, you may see it, but if you're looking this way, you'll see trees, and so that's the goal. When she says property values in nearby areas, nearby is a certain term that I don't have any idea what you're talking about. There are not houses nearby because of the visual limitations of the trees and those kind of things.
Time is up. But
Last thing I might just say is this is LC zoning, which allows 80 feet by right, not on a tower, but by any other structure. So we're not much above what's allowed today in that zoning district. I'd be glad to answer any questions. If I might just make one more comment. As far as the Native American situation, this does go to every tribe that's ever been in Wichita. So part of the NEPA and SHPO process is we have to get permission from every tribe. They have a right to oppose anything that we do. Be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Green, do you have a question?
Have you looked into, I think one of the speakers mentioned light pole coverage or light pole?
Sure. You know, that's coming. It is coming. The microcells are coming. They're not here much, and they don't have the ability to really do in-home coverage. Those are more to offload some of the capacity for people out walking, driving, those kind of things. And you're going to see a lot more of those. I'd say we're 3 to 5 years from really being in that. And really to kind of piggyback on that, that one of the things is that we don't do this just to cover what's there today. You know, the process for one of these is 18 months. So we've modeled and looked and evaluated what the needs are going to be in that area. As I said when I first started, we don't build these where we don't need them.
Thank you.
Foster, do you have a question?
Yes, sir. Greg, your comment about North High, I believe, allows me to...
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Your comment about North High, I believe, allows me to ask this question. Prior to receiving today this KSA 66-2019, co-location had been a consideration when I look at the staff report. And so I made a contact at the school district just because I was curious. And I visited with Carla Bell, who's the supervisor of customer support services.
Work with her all the time.
For IT.
Bright lady.
And to her knowledge, their office was never contacted regarding potential co-location. So, you know, as was mentioned by one of the speakers, they're shooting for July 1st to go to fiber. So my question is, you had mentioned that there's difficulty with this. What if you were able to put your equipment higher?
You know, again, when you're doing these cell splits, you don't, height isn't necessary. You're not trying to go to 150 feet. That's number one. Number two, Carla, if Sprint or T-Mobile or Verizon or AT&T want to go on a school tower, they contact me. That's who they contact. I'm the first contact. If you send something to one of their technical people, they will immediately refer them to me, and I do this all the time and get paid by the school district to do it. So to answer your question, no, Carla wouldn't know whether anybody had looked at this or not because I would have already looked at it, number one. Number two, the real issue here is, and again, forget the state law because T-Mobile has a policy, and they do what they call, and I apologize, but I want to explain this because I think it's important. They scrub a site. They say, go out and find a co-location opportunity for this site. That's the first thing. They don't say go find a raw land site. They say go find a building, a water tower, an existing tower, and we go out and we scrub a site, which I did on this site probably a year ago, 9 months ago, and evaluated everything in the area and sent back anything that was possible. And in this area, the really only thing that is really tall enough, you can't go on North High because you just don't really want to mess with that historical structure. It really becomes very difficult, is the tower that's there, and we evaluated that, and it determined it did not meet the needs that they were trying to accomplish. So then they come back and they say do a candidate package including raw lands. That's the second step. The first step is always, regardless of what the state law says, regardless of even what the master plan says, that is T-Mobile's policy. And I know that because I've been doing T-Mobile work for 12 years, and that's always the way that it works. Find an existing site. If not, go find an alternative. So we went through that process before we ever got to this.
Dave, any
Thank you.
further question? Or you okay?
Now, you may not be able to answer this. This may be for staff instead of you, but do you know who owns the land where the walking path is?
Park Department. Park
Okay.
Board, the Board of Park Commissioners. That's not city property. It's actually owned by the Board of Park Commissioners.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the agent?
I'll stand by if you have any questions.
Yeah, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. Mr. Warren.
I'm going to make a motion to approve. Been looking at this map, trying to find a place anywhere close that would be better than this location based on the commercial aspects of the buildings that are around it, the other uses that are around it. There was a time when this was a pristine area, and then people started building houses. They put streets in, they put street lights in. It's, you know, it's part of growth is that we have to have, I mean, we're a nation that survives on towers because we have cell phones and we're upset if we don't have it. And I can't think of a place that, just from what I've seen here and what's been presented by the speakers, both those for and opposed, that find a location that would be better. So I would move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Warren, seconded by Mr. Green, and we now have open for discussion. And Mr. Foster, I'll recognize you.
You know, we received this listing here of 18 items, limits of local government on applications for towers, the state statute. What I don't see on this listing is the concept, does a cell tower fit in the neighborhood? And I think the neighbors that have taken time to come here today have clearly demonstrated this does not. Therefore, I will make a substitute motion to disapprove the application.
I hear a second. Seeing none, motion dies. Back to the main motion and discussion. If there's any more discussion, please indicate. Foster?
Given that the motion died, I would stress very strongly with staff that they follow this through with the applicant relative to things that have been raised by the neighbors about sticking to the wireless plan relative to making this fit in, whether it's changing the design or something, but I strongly urge staff to follow through on this.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So it passes 10-1. Next item is number 8. And Dave, you're on again here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Was this a question from someone on the commission, or was it in the audience? Was it Mr. Foster? Do you have a question on this, or do you want to hear the whole thing?
It's a question. Yeah.
Let's start out with the question and see if that answers it. If not,
Okay.
we'll go back.
Dave, I want to make sure I understand from the staff report, would this allow for the intermixing of recreational vehicles with manufactured or mobile homes?
Yeah, that's what it's for.
The answer is yes, just as the approval of the previous request at Pannier and also Regency that was done last fall. This, if approved, would allow the landowner to take vacant spaces within the park and lease them to existing or to recreational vehicles, even though there may be manufactured homes already there, yes.
I would just provide a comment. For a project, I had cause to tour many manufactured home parks or mobile home parks as well. And what was clearly learned from that is when you intermix recreational vehicles with the other type of homes, you have serious issues with outdoor storage. It is very haphazard, and frankly, it's just plain ugly. So my suggestion is that this ought to be added, that rather than mingling it, those need to be grouped to provide an aesthetic setting within the parks. I don't know what you do with a comment like that, but I think it needs to be said about the aesthetics in the manufactured home parks.
Hey, look, what's the nature?
let's add a clarification on that same question. So would a tiny home be considered a recreational vehicle?
About 99% of the time, tiny homes are recreational vehicles, yes.
So they would actually fall within this also?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, since we're doing this a little out of order, let me ask the audience if there's anybody that wants to speak on this. Okay, so we just treated this as a question. Mr. Foster, you had your question answered. And,
Move to approve.
Second.
oh, wait a minute. We didn't really give the applicant a chance to talk. I assume they're okay with waiving their opportunity to talk.
Applicant here?
Okay,
Are they here?
I don't,
Guys here on behalf of the RV park? No.
okay, we do not have anybody. We'll bring it back to the commission for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Dave, were you interested in making any tag-ons or?
I don't think it would matter, frankly.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Yeah.
It's not germane, I think, whether or not we pass this. I had some conversation with Dave about my main concern on these, and I'm not sure how we solve it, is we're going to see a pattern of this all over town, I think, and my concern is that recreational vehicles will be used as rental units. This park is not in a place that's going to get highway traffic. They're going to look for a place to stay all night, in my opinion. And my concern is, and I don't know whether that's true or not, maybe it isn't, that they would use these as, you know, as housing units, and maybe that's okay. Not anything we can do about it if that's, from what Dave says, there's nothing we can do about it if that's what they choose to do. So that's where we are.
We had discussion this morning at Advanced Plans that we need to be updated a little bit more on the whole concept of tiny homes. And that's going to be brought to us, I believe, next meeting. And Mr. Bill Johnson has a question.
Just going to put my personal experience on record. I've got a 45-foot motor coach. I've been all the way to Florida. I've been all the way to Texas. I've been all the way to California. And you see a lot of these facilities now that at one time were mobile home parks that they have converted, where you got a pull through, where you can pull through with your motorhome with your car behind it, and they're very, very handy. The other thing I want to say, there's not a lot of places to stop and park overnight and have water, sewer, electric. I just took mine back to Indiana to the factory for a 2-year checkup, and virtually from just south of Michigan to Wichita, I found one spot that I could park during the winter overnight. So it forced you to drive 850 miles because you couldn't find a place to stop with something that big. You know, it's like anything else. There's some real nice RV stuff and there's junk, but I mean, I would think if anybody that's converting one would want to, people that's got a little nicer stuff, so they keep the parks up, and there's some very nice ones, but.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 10-1. Passes. Dave? Okay. Now we're on item 10. Dave, you're very popular today.
Sit down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is request to rezone the property at 537 West MacArthur Road. We're essentially immediately on the west side of Gold Street, on the south side of MacArthur. It is this kind of flag-shaped property that's outlined on this particular aerial. You can see from this zoning map, most of the property is zoned SF5. there is a strip of land along Gold Street that's zoned MF29. Request is to rezone this to LC, and also asking for a conditional use permit for an event center in the city. This is the aerial of the property in question. Access comes off of MacArthur, just immediately to the west of Gold Street, and comes back into the property. You can see the larger development around the pond. It's that the bulk of the pond is over into this other property that's also got a CUP on it. And within some of the language and stuff that's discussed in the staff report, we talk about needing to clarify use of that activity with this application. Here is the location and the comp plan. Will be on or south of the established central area. This property is at the very far north end of the South Wichita-Hayesville plan area covered by that plan. This is a hand drawing provided by the applicant of what's proposed. You can see the drive entrance coming off of MacArthur, coming south into the property. There's an existing building at this location. Some of the other buildings are being demolished as identified in this plan. There is also a proposed new building at the south end of the ownership, kind of just to the, between Gold Street and the edge of the pond, that would be used for the event center, parking north of that, and then parking to the west of the existing improvements on the property. This is a shot looking south, kind of southeast towards the pond. You can see the edge of one of the buildings that's already existing, and obviously this is the edge of the site. The location of the new building is just to the left of this particular picture. This is further back, really kind of the edge of the entrance into the site. That's the corner of the building you saw earlier. The pond is right in this location. This is the existing structure that's on the east side of that property. This looks south, roughly where the new building is proposed to be built in this general vicinity. This is looking to the north, to the homes that are to the north. And it's right along the edge of this kind of what looks like a drive area. That is where the only issue that's come up new since this picture was taken. The owner has gone out and constructed a metal fence along this property line, the backside of these homes. And one of the things that has come up is that the, just as an earlier case that Kathy had talked about, metal fencing is not listed as a permitted screening material between these kind of uses and single-family residential development. So if, and I think the applicant's going to address that in their requests, but that will need to be addressed by the Planning Commission if they wish to amend the conditions that's applicable to this particular use. This is kind of looking west. You can see the edge of the pond, and looking west back towards there will be additional parking here on the right-hand side of this picture. So the recommendation is for approval. There's a number of conditions outlined and listed, including some restrictions on ultimate uses of the event center with relation to what it would do. It's recognized that they will also, if they have the ability, or if they seek approval for a liquor license, it will technically qualify as a nightclub in the city, but the intent, one of the restrictions and prohibitions is that what we're approving is the rezoning LC, but we're also then, through the conditional use, putting restrictions that it's not going to open up into a nightclub or a bar. That would take a future amendment if that's what is desired. And that, of all the comments and questions I've had, prior to the public hearing. I did have one person come in and indicate concerns, lives immediately across the street to the east on Gold Street, lived down in this area and was concerned about, I'm sorry, down in here, and was concerned that it would result in rezoning LC, would open it up for a bar. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Richardson.
On the site plan we have, I don't see the location for outdoor activities. And you're restricting those to the location on the plan. And can you put the site plan up? Maybe you have a different one.
We've not had one submitted, and well, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, the outdoor activity area would need to be identified on the revised site plan, which is required a couple of conditions above that.
And so can we suggest a location as part of this approval for the outdoor activities?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. The other question I had, Dave, is let's assume that the owner changes his mind, doesn't put in a event center. I assume it could be used for any LC use that he chooses at that point forward. Are we limiting it to this
Except for the
activity?
ones out in the staff report that are identified as prohibited under this use. Scott, you help me, am I misstating it? That was the intent.
Your statement's accurate. It would be a zone change to LC, and so it would allow all the uses in LC and a conditional use for an event center.
It's my understanding that you could use it for anything in addition to the event center.
Any other questions for staff?
A question. Dave, do you know why on this site plan there's a, it looks like they brought in a separate drive just parallel with Gold Street? Why wouldn't they just tie into Gold Street instead of having two access points right there off of MacArthur that are right next to each other?
That's an existing drive, and they don't own that, and I don't recall off the top of my head whether or not Gold Street's got restrictions on it to access. There's just not an existing access to that point.
The subject property is unplatted, and one of the conditions is that prior to issuing a permit for an event center, they're going to have to plat the property, and when they do that, we're going to establish the access point.
Any other questions for staff? Mr. Blake?
Question I have, just north of that, I think we heard a planning case just a month ago or so, that there's some new development that's being changed in that whole area just north. Is that correct?
Up in this area?
Yes, that whole area. That's correct, okay.
Okay. I'm going to let the agent or applicant talk, but before I do that, could I ask if there's anybody in the audience that wants to speak on this issue? Okay, thank you. Give us your best.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Greg Ferris. I represent Mark Senior LLC, the owner of the property. Let's see if I can find the zoning map. As you can see, there is significant industrial and commercial zoning in this area. You do have a little bit of residential here. You get down here and you get back into the industrial and commercial zoning. This property here, all of this property is owned by the applicant. He has a substantial home and outdoor recreation that he does as a personal matter. He's going to be very protective. He has a large investment in this area. Be very protective of what happens on this property. But because of this industrial and commercial development, he believed it was appropriate for this at this time. The idea is that by having the proximity to the lake, weddings would have a nice, beautiful setting. There's trees. The reason the access is here, we did not think it would be appropriate to run traffic down the residential street and then into the area. This is a arterial street with commercial zoning on each side, so that this appeared to be the most appropriate access point, the existing driveway that is there on MacArthur. Regarding the fence, and I apologize, this was news to me, and I was not aware of it until yesterday when staff had made me aware. I called the I called the owner, and he said he had been working with some of these neighbors, and they had asked him to do that, and so he did. So we would probably like not to take down that fence. I think the neighbors like it there. If you hear otherwise, then I will pass that on to him as well. But if there is no issue, we'd like to, only on this portion, allow the metal to be considered the solid screening. Here, we intend to do the solid screening fences as required by the code, along with the landscape ordinance, which would be required by the code to separate LC from residential. We have no problem complying with that and intend to do so. We believe because of all the rezoning that has happened in the property and the commercial zoning, it's an appropriate request because the property immediately adjacent to it is owned by the applicant and would be most impacted. We believe that it's appropriate request. I think I've outlined in my letter the items in policy that is for approval. And with that, I would stand for any questions that you might have.
Ferris, I have a couple questions for you. One, you said there's a residence on this property right now?
Well, it's gone now, but let's see here if I can get to right here is his house.
Oh, okay.
And this is all the way down to here, and here is all his property. So this is all the owner of the property that is, this is, I believe, an outbuilding for his lawnmowers, et cetera, because it's a big parcel. And, but his house is right here.
Second question was, is this, I realize it's just a sketch. Did you do this sketch?
I did.
Oh. So when this is submitted, I'm sure we'll see how 40 spaces fit in that little parking lot that's.
Well, I think the 40 spaces isn't only in that single parking lot, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was total, wasn't it?
No, you got 40 there and 25 additional up there in the.
Right, this was still there. This is going to be able to be expanded to whatever's needed.
We don't
But
have
yes,
to worry about it.
I won't be doing that. This was for this purpose. They'll have to go through plating and all the other steps, and they'll get somebody a little better than me to do that.
I have no other questions. Any other questions? Mr. Richardson? His will be a lot better question than mine.
I'm not going to recommend an architect today. It looks like there's a wide right-of-way for Gold Street. Is that correct?
It really is, yeah. If you go back, I don't know if
the railroad track used to go there.
it's kind of, when I was looking at this, you can see that the property line is here, and it goes, so this is all right-of-way along here.
That's what I wondered. So
Yeah, it's very, very large right-of-way.
So because of the right-of-way, he's going to obviously be set back beyond that.
Exactly.
And
Well, and the structures are going to be clear over to the lake. The idea is to have the event center for weddings and such to be able to have the view and
Yeah.
those things. So we'll be putting that as close to the lake as possible.
I had a question for staff in terms of the screening required. Did we not say before, because the single families across the street, that they do not have a screening requirement from LC?
When you're across the street from residential, what's required is a landscape street yard.
Okay, but not a fence.
Yes, it generally is not a good idea to fence the front of a commercial property.
Yeah. Okay.
The questions? Okay, thank you, Greg, for now. Public comment, our first speaker. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Mike Dawson. I live at 4102 Gold, which is right here. This area he's talking about here, this is an old driveway. It's been there forever. We've lived there since 1966. I am opposed to this because who wants a bar in front of their house? We're talking across the street. Not me. These people here, it'd be in their backyard. This guy had Lord knows how much he spent on his house and the property, but he spent hundreds and hundreds of hours landscaping. Why he wants to put a bar there, I ain't got a clue. But bottom line is, he wants a bar across his front yard. I can't believe he does.
Questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you.
Now, this is railroad right-of-way here. Used to be the old Midland Railroad through here.
Do you
He
know
did
who,
put a driveway in right across from his house, across that right-of-way.
do we know who owns the railroad right away?
Yeah, it's city right away.
It is.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
I've noticed you said that you've lived there quite a while. So do you see that over the years that areas have improved? Has he invested into that area?
Oh,
Do you think
oh, yeah.
he has
Yeah.
quite a bit?
He took a place that hadn't been touched in 40 years, and we used to go swimming in this lake. It used to be called MacArthur Lake. And but that was the driveway to get all the way down here. This is where the beachfront was, where we used to go swimming. But, you know, when they closed it down, I don't know, 40 years ago, it just been undergrowth. He's brought in several hundred piles of dirt and semis, and it's beautiful. But I can't figure out why he wants to do a bar there.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Foster? Just a second, ma'am. We have one more question here.
I was just curious, did you happen to pick up, or I don't know if you've seen the staff report, but the distinction between a bar and an event center? Has that been mentioned to you?
There's a 6-foot chain link fence there right now.
No, I'm talking about the land use that this application is for. We're talking about, you've mentioned a bar, and so I'm reading in here trying to find that it would be a bar, but the application is for what's called an event center.
Well, if you read down a few lines, it says nightclub.
Right, that's so they can allow for alcohol, but I think we need to talk further about the conditions, but.
Well, if this bombs out or something, you can read the writing on the wall what it's going to go to. It's
Okay.
neighborhood opinion.
Any other questions for the speaker? Okay, now we'll go to the next speaker.
My name's Tony Meyer. I'm 4106 Gold. See, my house is next to his, which is right here. He bought this property, I'm thinking 5-6 years ago. And at the time, they were considering apartments there. And we had to come down here for meetings then and everything. And they told us then that it would only be zoned for 2 single-family homes, and it would never change. Well, here we are, 6 years later. He's wanting to put event center in there. Well, that's nice, but not in a residential area, because, you know, they have loud bands. They stay open till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And if they're gonna have outdoor events, they're gonna have loud music outside. And I know residential noise level is 10 o'clock, and they're gonna be, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And like he said, if the event center doesn't pan out, is it gonna turn into a bar? My gut feeling, I have belief that that's what it's really actually, the shortcome of it. Weddings, he's got down 130 people only. Most weddings consist of 250, 300 people. And I don't understand why he wants to put it right here across from property, which is only like 40 yards from our property. Why don't he put it back here or back here where there is no residential houses at all?
because he could get access back there, because he has parties back there all the time now anyway. And like I said, he's owned a bar. I've known him from owning Crazy Horse, you know, and so I think that's his intent. That's it for me. Thank you.
Questions for the speaker? I'll figure out a way. Any other questions for the speaker? Thank you for coming in within your time. I had a question for the last speaker. I would like to know what was on his mind.
You found a way.
Thank you. Hey, I would like to talk, Spirit Lake is, where's this house go? Is down here. That place is quiet. It's been there since Boyne had it, and Spirit's got it now, been since the 80s. They drive up and down the street on a daily basis. The only time that place is noisy is July 4th celebration. One time a year, they shoot off fireworks, bring in live music, and it is noisy. And one time a year, you know, I don't have a problem with that. Labor Day weekend, they're open 24 hours a day. Memorial weekend, all through there, they're open they're quiet. You never hear any jam boxes. They do a really good job of keeping the noise down.
Thank you. I think you answered my question. Next speaker, please. We have a next speaker. Thank you all for speaking. We'll bring it back for a rebuttal here for Mr. Ferris. You have 2 minutes. Well, you thought I was going to forget, didn't you?
Thank you, sir. I'll be brief. I think I would point out, we are in agreement with the conditions, including the condition that says that no business classified as a drinking establishment, tavern, Class A club, Class B club, sexually oriented business, or anything that sells alcohol to the general public shall be allowed, or they are prohibited. So the conditions prohibit this from becoming a bar without going through a process like this again, which I don't really believe that was his intent, because that was the condition. I also would point out the hours of operation, Sunday through Thursday. They will be over at 10:30 p.m., 11 o'clock on Friday, on Friday, and then I think 1 o'clock on Friday and Saturday. So we've kind of limited back the hours as well. So I believe that we've tried to make this fit in. And again, I would point out that the person impacted probably the most by this will be the owner of the house, so he'll be policing this very carefully. He's not going anywhere. He's got too much invested. Be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Foster.
Greg, Mr. Richardson reminds us that this goes with the land in terms of the zoning change. And my question is, I've been looking here at the permitted uses. Would you restate the ones that you said would not, that?
It's in the condition number 1, I believe. Yes, condition number 1 has no business that is classified as a drinking establishment, tavern, Class A club, Class B club, defined by the code, shall be allowed. Sexually oriented business or alcohol sales to the general public or individual sales of liquor by the drink is also prohibited. So those are the prohibited uses as spelled out in the conditions that we agree with.
So just to be sure, you went through the entire list and kind of considered what might be appropriate for the neighborhood or any concerns that might be raised?
Staff actually wrote this condition, and we don't have any problem with it.
Thank you.
Miles.
Can you tell me how far from the back part of the houses that sit on MacArthur to this event center, about how many feet that might be? And then how many feet it is from the event center to the houses that are directly across the street on the east side of Gold?
I would say it appears that the property line, I don't know about to the houses themselves, but to the property line, to the structure, is probably 125 feet north, and probably about that with the right-of-way to the east, 125 to 150 feet.
Other questions for Mr. Ferris?
I got a staff question, but not for him.
No other questions? We'll ask staff to come back up, and we'll start with Mr. Richardson.
Dave, is there a way to have an event center without rezoning this as LC?
As I recall, this had to be zoned LC to be eligible for conditional use for the event center. If I remember right, that's what it said in the Unified Zoning Code.
Because I know we've had some in the county that certainly were not zoned LC, but I know they have different regulations in the
Yeah.
county for event centers than we do.
Yeah, a lot more things are permitted by conditional use in the county
Right.
than they are in the city.
And by the same token, by this conditional use, could we limit the use of this facility just to an event center?
Well, we are doing that, and we're also then adding
Well,
the
no, we're not.
restriction under other uses in LSI by saying those, the drinking establishment issues cannot go on as well.
I think the staff earlier said we're not limiting it to just an event center. It would allow any LC use.
Well, the rezoning would do that. The conditional use comes on top of that adds an event center, but also then, as a condition, puts restrictions on it like a protective overlay would.
So what Scott said was
Yeah.
he could have all uses permitted by right in LC plus the event center. The only thing that's eliminated is the bar and tavern and that sort of stuff, yeah. So, I mean, yes, you could add to the protective overlay and limit uses that you thought were not appropriate in the LC district at this location.
Thank you.
But yeah, but this is Gold Street, so I'm talking about.
I'm sorry, apparently I misunderstood the question.
Any other, Mr. Blick?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not for staff. I didn't know.
Oh, we had another staff question here from Mr. Warren.
This question comes as a result of short-term and long-term memory loss, because we've asked this question in times past. The hours of operation, who enforces that? That becomes a condition that on here. Who, if that becomes a violation and a problem for the neighbors, what is their regress?
Realistically speaking, it's the Wichita Police Department, because if somebody's violating or a noise complaint at midnight or 1 in the morning, there's nobody on staff to do it except for them. It otherwise is enforced by MAPC.
Thank you.
By us now.
Well, I'm sorry. It's recently changed. It's by planning, that department
Thank you.
changed.
Any other questions?
South side. It's south side.
Has this
Josh?
been to the DAB?
Yes, it did. It went Monday. DAB recommended approval 8-2.
Good information. Mr. Blick?
I'm surprised you didn't ask that.
I just want to state I'm very familiar with this area. This is actually my area. And I've seen some, recently we've seen some future growth and some projects that are coming up. Just a statement based on from what the property owner's investment and also what the adjacent property owners, they believe that, he's doing the right thing. He's doing the project and so forth. I'd entertain a motion to approve what is written per staff's recommendation.
You're submitting the motion.
Yes.
Are you considering the fence? Do we need to, if the fence as is now is okay, do we need to include it? Okay, would you include the metal fence as acceptable in this case? I'd second it then.
Question.
Discussion.
Got a question, yeah. So does your motion allow any use in LC or only this use?
Based off of what staff's recommendation would be is any use.
Okay, so it would be any use allowed in LC in addition to this? Okay.
And LC is pretty restricted anyways, as outdoor storage and.
Okay, Mr. Foster, do you have a question?
I just want to ask Mr. Warren, you brought up the idea of hours of operation. 6 a.m. seems a little early to me, frankly, but you have any comments on if that should be modified?
Depends on definitions. If 6 a.m. is the cleanup crew coming in on site to do the cleanup from the night before, then I don't have a problem. If you're starting, if 6 a.m. is when you start partying, then that, that's, if your event starts at 6 a.m., that's a different deal. So I don't know if you have to nail that down, but.
How many of you attended that started at 6?
None at 6 in the morning. I've had people out I was gonna say, I've had people out at my farm and they're still there at 6 a.m.
Love it.
Get
Any
ready
other
to start
questions?
over.
Yeah.
We're open for a motion.
Got one.
Yeah, we had it in a second.
One second.
More discussion.
You want another one?
No more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Two. So what do we got? 9-2? 9-2, it passes. Thank you. All right, do we still have another one? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for waiting. Dave, you have one more chance here to make it big. Item 12, case number 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request to rezone the property roughly at the corner of Central and Grove. The address is actually on Poplar Street, which is on the east side of the property. The rezoning, even though the legal description as outlined on this aerial and the map shows all the property all the way up to Central, the rezoning actually is only affecting the southern portion of that particular property, the area that's Zone B, or kind of the brownish tan color that's on this zoning map. The property is the facility that the current owner is the Children's Service League of Kansas. As I understand, it used to be a medical facility of some nature and covers the southern 3/4 of the entire property. The land that's immediately adjacent to Central Avenue is already zoned LC, and we're not changing that. This kind of shows the area in relationship to the comprehensive plan and what it talks about within that. This is the property. This is actually on the west side of the property, looking somewhat to the north. I think, no, I'm actually on the east side of the property looking south. I'm sorry. This is Poplar Street, because that's, I think, the cul-de-sac at the end. This is the west side of the property looking south. Grove is on the far right-hand side, on the other side of the fence. And you can see what the building looks like in that area. This is looking west from the site. No, I'm sorry, this is looking south from the site towards the homes that are south, or maybe you're looking east from the site, which is across Poplar Street. Sorry. This is looking across Grove at the homes that are on the other side, west side of Grove Street. And this is also interior site, looking kind of northwest from the site across Grove Street in that direction. Probably easier to get oriented what we're doing here. The request was to rezone LC presumption because the northern portion of the property is zoned LC. Staff's recommendation is to deny that request, instead grant NR zoning neighborhood retail for the property. Some of the documentation provided indicated there's a desire to use the bulk of the building for office uses, also want to have some opportunities for potential future other commercial uses as well. Much like it was the case on some of the rezonings that happened, you'll call the one earlier this year or last year on further out on Central, where request was to go to LC and we went to NR. That is what the recommendation is here, not to open up LC completely down Grove this deep into an established residential neighborhood. That would still allow, if granted, the range of uses that the applicant wishes to do for office uses. The medical offices are allowed in the B zoning district, but general office is not in B. That's why we're talking a rezoning. So I will comment just for the record, at just about an hour before the meeting, I received an email from Mr. Baruchak. Is that you? Okay, he's showing up. I'll let him talk about what he emailed, but I've got an email that came in concerned about the property. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
What was the applicant's reaction when you suggested the zoning that you would recommend?
Well, and I don't know if the applicant's here. I did have a conversation with some of the folks that are aware of this stuff, and they had no opposition that was expressed to me. I think it was questions they had to the process, but we've not heard anything further.
Seeing none, agent or applicant?
Hello, my name is Lori Moody. I'm with Dunn Properties. We are located at 2400 North Woodlawn, Suite 115. I honestly didn't know about the change from LC to NR until I went to the DAB meeting, which was Tuesday night. There was some mix-up with the letter that was to be sent to us, and so I honestly didn't get or know of that until I went to the DAB meeting. I don't think we really have a problem with it. I'm representing Chris Rickerson, and he would be here, but he's on his honeymoon. And so when we started to purchase this property, we had no idea what situation we would be in. When we put the property under contract, and I get really nervous, so I'm sorry. When we put the property under contract, we were told it was LC, and Chris has elite staffing. And elite staffing is a temporary employment, and he's basically two buildings from there, and he is in dire need of expanding. So the reason we went for rezoning is because we just wanted to occupy the building. The previous tenant was the Kansas Children's Service League, and they built the building in 1974, and that's the zoning that they could use. So it just hasn't ever been updated. The building has been vacant for 2 years. There's been a lot of vandalism. We're going to have to replace all the air conditioners. At this point, Chris is planning on taking, I think it's about 12,000 square feet, and he's planning on taking about 3,000 of that space, and probably will try to just lease it out as office space. Just to let you know, I don't know if you're aware, but Elite has been nominated by the Chamber as one of the best small businesses in Wichita. So I think it's really exciting what's happening in that area. I don't know if you guys are aware, but they're doing I'm sure you are, but Hunter Healthcare is, well, how do you put up the aerial? Do I click it once? So Hunter Healthcare is redoing a building here And they'll be, in fact, they're under construction right in this area. And then they're doing a, what's the name of it? There's a new urban retail development. I don't know if you're aware of that, where they're doing all the containers. So there's a lot of exciting things happening in this area. And Chris is very excited about being part of that and really wants to make this area grow and do well. And I think he would be excellent for this neighborhood.
Are you authorized to speak for the
Yes.
owner?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Anybody in the audience like to speak on this? Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Michael Baruchak. I live at 354 North Green Street. On this view, my house is this tiny little property right here. I've resided in this neighborhood for, I don't know, 30 plus years. I'm real active in my neighborhood association. I've delivered newsletters. These are my friends and neighbors that live in the 400 block of North Green, immediately adjacent to this. There are a couple of things I really think need to be pointed out here. On the face, this looks pretty straightforward. It looks like there's a property that somebody was occupying, and maybe the zoning allowed the previous use, which it did, definitely. Medical services are allowed in residential zoning. Any idea that the buyer didn't check the zoning ahead of time before buying it, I think that when you look at your own guidelines, as far as marketability being used as a reason or increased value, any failure of due diligence, any failure to market, anything that is up to the buyers, the previous buyer or the next occupant, really is not really supposed to be taken into account. It should carry no weight. Physically, it looks like this is a block, an ordinary block. In reality, you can see pretty well in this picture that the space from Green to Grove is as wide as all the other nearby blocks. What's described as a street, Poplar right here, that's immediately to the east, on the east boundary of this property, is literally only a 25-foot right-of-way. It's not only very narrow, other than in the north end that we are not talking about, the east edge of the pavement on Poplar does not have a curb. It doesn't have a curb because effectively it's the alley access for these Green Street residential properties. These Green Street residential properties aren't, when people go out in their backyards, they don't see a backyard on the other side of their back fence. They see a little bit of pavement and then this property we're discussing. I think that's very pertinent. Yeah, could I get a little more time?
30 seconds.
Okay. This isn't really adjacent to a residential neighborhood. This is solidly inside of it. Unlike your policies that apply farther east, it's a very narrow street. This is the backsides of a very calm residential neighborhood. This isn't next to it, it's inside of it. The people who have objections I've talked to say that neighborhood office would be entirely suitable, and it entirely would be allowing the uses that the agent and the prospective buyer say they intend. What it would not allow is restaurant and general retail, which would be very objectionable at that site. Thank you.
Questions for the speaker? Okay. Dave, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
What was the vote at the DAB?
Pardon me?
What was the DAB vote?
Yes, yes, it did go to DAB. It passed. Yeah,
What was the vote?
yeah. But- Yeah.
5-2. Any other speakers? Any other speakers? Not yet.
I have a curiosity question for staff. Can you tell us any more about Poplar, whether it's a half street or
Alley or?
an alley, or really what
I cannot tell you off the top of my head whether or not it was originally an alley. It's not a 60-foot right-of-way, no. Not south of Central. You can see further north of the right-of-way, one would guess, based on the dimension, that when this was platted back in the 1800s, it probably functioned more as an alley. But it is a public street now and even has access in a cul-de-sac at the south end of it. That is public right-of-way. So it was improved from central south to the creek through here with a cul-de-sac at the end, and that's all public right-of-way.
I wondered what that little curve at the bottom of what we're considering was.
Mr.
too.
Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this former site was a school that was named for me. It was Lowell Elementary before this building was built. I just thought we ought to have that in the record, which is probably why it has the street configuration it does, because I think it probably got platted as a school site in the beginning. There you go.
I think the public speaker has raised some good thoughts that this is really into the neighborhood with that narrow right-of-way. I'm thinking of what occurred east of Hillside on the south side of Central there, east of Interest Bank. What kind of oversight would occur as this play out? Should there be questions of a little additional right-of-way? You know, the concept of site plan review came up. What would happen on this site to make sure that whatever is developed is integrated well into the neighborhood?
Even with site plan review, at least the occupancy change that's proposed right now is not proposing any physical change to the building. So you'd be dealing just with an occupancy issue, and rather than any building additions or other expansions onto parking lots or any other improvements. And as a result, even someone walking in with a building permit's not going to trigger anything. It would be formally heavily reviewed. Now, what would happen in the future with it? I don't, we'll play speculation games, I guess, to a certain extent, because we don't know what the standards will be. But you've got lots of properties scattered throughout the city that are small and tight based on how the land exists. This is this is not an undersized lot width-wise. It's just that and technically it's got access. It's got frontage adjacent to Grove. It just didn't have access onto it. So, but I can't believe that there's anything would trigger that would impose anything. Even question was raised about is there screening or landscaping requirements only if they come in and get permits that are actually building onto the building. An occupancy change isn't going to do that.
Pictures.
I think there's no reason they couldn't have access to Grove Street, is there? Is there some access limitations there that we know of?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I'm just thinking that when the city made all the improvements along Grove, they had obtained restrictions on access onto Grove Street, but I'd have to go back and double check that.
I think, if memory serves me, I think probably Urban Renewal bought that whole strip through there and put the street in at one time. And the question would be, would they not have access on the Grove Street, which frankly would make more sense than access onto Poplar. Of course, the houses across the street from Grove have a frontage road in front of them, so we're quite a ways away. It would make some sense to me to have access on the Grove, but I guess the applicant they'll have to deal with that after they buy it. So,
Mr. Hartman.
Dave, do you know what the parking situation is on that site right now, and whether that would affect the proposed uses they're talking about?
I don't know the number of spaces, but there are a number of existing parking spaces on the south side of the building. There is a parking lot on the north side, and then it bleeds over into the area to the north that's zoned LC right now as well. And then north of that parking lot, up to the right-of-way along Central, is presently grass. But if need be, additional parking could be added in there. It's all under one ownership, so it would be considered on site.
There's no,
The access to that building right now is off of,
Yes, you come in onto Poplar Street off of Central and come down either on this north end, or you can come down here on the south end.
Dave, there's no LC use presently, right?
The very north end of the property is presently zoned LC,
Right, but there's no LC use there.
but this portion of it, no.
No, I mean, the red is zoned LC, but there's no use there. No
No.
building.
There's a little bit of the parking lot that extends into LC, and the rest of it's grass.
Okay. So your recommendation, staff recommendation is to deny, but you would suggest a neighborhood retail?
Staff's recommendation is to deny LC on all of this, zone this portion, the south end of it, into NR.
Mr. Green.
I know the speaker mentioned something about neighborhood office. They wouldn't be opposed to neighborhood office. Could you possibly elaborate a little bit for the speaker, the differences between neighborhood residential and neighborhood office?
I don't have the code in front of me, but
The neighborhood, NR is neighborhood retail.
I mean, neighborhood retail, sorry.
And the main difference there is it doesn't allow some uses like convenience stores. It also does not allow drive-throughs or drive-up order boards. It also limits any individual use to 8,000 square feet, and restaurants are limited to 2,000 square feet. Basically, it allows what you would consider to be neighborhood-friendly retail and restaurant-type stuff in office compared to limited commercial where it could be a much larger building, like a Walmart or whatever.
Did I see a question over here?
Can we modify about access to Grove Street in this,
Lighting issue.
This really is a zoning issue that
that would have to come to us later then if they wanted that to see if they could do it?
Yeah, I think the only way you could do that is if you added a protective overlay that somehow said they needed to dedicate access controls but without us knowing if it's already there, I think it would be
Yeah, we need more
clunky.
information
Yeah.
to be able to do that.
Dale, would they be able to do what they want to do in this building now with neighborhood office?
Neighborhood retail.
neighborhood office would also allow the general office uses. It would just limit the ability to market space not otherwise occupied by offices to some of the other neighborhood retail type support things that Dale was talking about, personal service uses and some of the other issues. He's pulling up the zoning code. It's just You know, and I know concern was raised in conversations about, well, NR would open up the potential possibly for restaurant uses. Well, two things come into play for converting to a restaurant. This existing building, to my knowledge, does not have a kitchen facility in it, so you're talking pretty extensive remodeling to create kitchen space, which is not inexpensive. And secondly, parking demands change as a result of parking for that versus office space, and there may not be enough space for additional parking. So,
The neighborhood office isn't going to allow any of the retail uses that you would get within R. Primarily would be the main difference.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that we have a rebuttal, and then we can ask whatever questions we want before we make a vote.
Okay. We'll stand for rebuttal. You have 2 minutes.
You guys all know this is my first rodeo at this, so I'm trying to understand. Are you suggesting that we go to general office, or are we just,
I think the suggestion was neighborhood retail.
okay. I'm happy with what staff is recommending, and we're willing to do that. Does anybody have any questions for me?
That parking lot at the south end, is that the one that has a black wrought iron fence?
It has a
around it?
chain link fence all the way
Chain link
around it.
fence, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, bring it back to the commission for action. Mr. Johnson.
I'd go with staff comments as neighborhood retail and not LC.
For the south portion, correct?
Well, the only part that's up.
Yeah, the
for-
LC would remain up on Central.
Yes.
Have a motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Miles. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. My count's right, it passed, 10 to 1? 10 to 1. All right. Now we come to the part of our meeting where we've all been waiting for. Are we setting a public hearing or having a public hearing?
This is the public hearing.
Okay. Would you like to make a presentation, Mr. Williams? Thank you.
Okay, Matt Williams, Associate Planner. This is the public hearing for the Delano Neighborhood Plan. You guys initiated this process in the middle of last year. Delano is one of the oldest Wichita neighborhoods. The boundaries of the neighborhood are the river on the north and the east, Meridian on the west, and Kellogg on the south. One of the reasons that this plan was initiated was with all of the new development in the area, including the three things on the screen: the Advanced Learning Library, the River Vista Apartment Complex, and the Delano Catalyst site. Another big change coming to the area is the potential for a multi-use sports complex. With all of the activity in the area, several of the neighbors and the city were interested in coming up with a new neighborhood plan. The original Delano neighborhood plan was put into place in 2001. Since then, a lot of the initiatives that were in there have been successful. The property values along Douglas have gone up. There's been a lot of success for that. Going through the process for the new plan, we conducted a few different phases. We looked at the existing conditions of the area. We had plenty of community input. We had a Delano developer forum, several open houses. We presented at neighborhood organizations. We presented at the DABs this week. Throughout all of it, this was a vision statement that we followed. We also looked at the guiding principles that were established for the comprehensive plan. To start with, we convened a Delano Plan Advisory Committee that had about 10 members on it, a couple from the Planning Commission, and then several representing local organizations and neighborhood groups within Delano. The end result were 11 land use recommendations. We grouped these into short, medium, and long term. We hope that this plan will act as a guide for development in the neighborhood for the next 15 years. And with that, I'll kind of go through the recommendations that we came up with. The first is the design of the ballpark village. The neighborhood wants to be involved with the design of this. They want to make sure that there's enough parking to cover the new uses as well as the uses off of Douglas that are currently there. They kind of envision mixed use around the ballpark with mixed use buildings. And then they also want to make sure that the ballpark takes design cues from the neighborhood so that it helps retain the character of Delano. And with being part of that design, one of the members of the Delano Plan Advisory Committee is going to be on the selection committee for the Delano pathway, and we hope that that can happen for the ballpark as well. The West Douglas streetscape, the streetscape has been improved between Seneca and Sycamore. We want to continue that streetscape west to Vine Street to help the businesses further along down on Douglas to kind of extend that business corridor within Delano. Neighborhood markers. The neighborhood's hoping to get some neighborhood markers that not only tell people that they've entered Delano on the different sides of it, but also direct people to the baseball stadium or the ice rink or different things within the neighborhood. The multi-use path is something that's very important to the neighborhood. This would fall along an abandoned rail corridor north of Douglas. So this pathway is intended to connect the river then up to the northwest of Wichita and then to the southwest of Wichita. So there's currently funding within the STAR and the TIF to design the whole project, but to construct from Seneca to the river. That's the selection committee that a couple of the members will be on that I talked about. Parking strategy. Talking to everybody in the neighborhood, they always mention that parking is a problem along Douglas Avenue. WAMPO is about to start a parking study for the whole city, and we want to make sure that the initiatives that come out of that are implemented in Delano and that they pay special attention to the Delano area. Future land use strategy. Right now there is a Delano overlay over the neighborhood that has design guidelines. There's a section of the neighborhood that's not included in that overlay, the northeast corner of the neighborhood, and we want to add that to the overlay. We want to update some of those design guidelines now that time has gone on with the baseball stadium and just the different projects going on in there. We've also recommended that we rezone the commercial properties along Douglas to CBD. That would help take away some of the red tape along there, take away the parking requirements and some of the setback requirements right on Douglas. And then we've talked about implementing a future land use map to help with rezoning in the future. Some of our midterm recommendations that we see happening maybe after 5 years or so, there's a potential to kind of activate this Hanley corridor. Hanley is a street that runs from Douglas straight up and that would meet the Keeper of the Plains. On the summer nights, there's hundreds of people out there that go see the Keeper of the Plains light up, but there's really nothing for them to do. If we could kind of activate Hanley and pull them into the neighborhood, having different uses along there, that could really help the neighborhood. But currently, McLean dead ends, or Hanley dead ends at McLean, so there's really no access for pedestrians or drivers to come across. Housing conditions have always been mentioned as a problem with the neighborhood. There's some different ways that we're looking about helping those. McLean Boulevard, we've recommended reducing McLean Boulevard between Douglas and Maple to a 2-lane. That would be between the river and the baseball stadium. We think that would help pedestrian access, get between the two uses, maybe open up some more riverfront space along the river. And then our long-term recommendations are a river plaza on the east side of the baseball stadium, somewhere along there, that would help create a gathering space for the neighborhood, but would also be activated with different uses throughout the day and throughout the year. And then a pedestrian bridge that would connect the sports complex to the performing arts complex and convention space. And the pedestrian bridge, like the pathway, there's funding in that STAR and TIF for some of those projects. So let's see. This is the public hearing. It would go to City Council on April 3rd and then County Commission on April 11th. I'd be happy to answer any questions on the plan.
Start at that end of the table. Ms. Miller-Stevens.
There are currently design restrictions for buildings and businesses that come into Delano. Does this totally do away with those design restrictions? And if so, what replaces them?
Those design guidelines affect the Delano overlay. The Delano overlay is over the whole neighborhood outlined in black except for this northeast portion up here. So we're recommending that we add that portion to the Delano overlay so that the design guidelines would also affect that area. And then we've proposed looking at those design guidelines and seeing if anything needs to be done with them, updating them or any of that. That's not part of this plan. This plan, approving this plan won't update the overlay or update the design guidelines. Those are future projects. Those are just the recommendations out of this plan are to look at those projects, if that makes sense.
Because some of what you have here looks like it might conflict with some of those design restrictions. I mean, they're pretty intense with some of their design restrictions. So that's why I was curious at what effect this would have or if it did away with them or what.
I don't think the design guidelines are too restrictive for the neighborhood. I think most people have been pretty happy with them. Yeah, I think that's pretty good so far.
Next. Dave.
Matt, I want to commend you, staff, and all the folks that were involved on the committee and things, because this is a very concise, it's visually easy to read, and it presents very clear direction on what ought to be considered in the future. So I really think you've done a good job there. But I do want to follow up. If you want to make some notes, I got 7 typos for you.
Okay.
Number 1, in the contents there, where it's talking about the figures in the appendix, check the spelling of the word poverty.
Could I ask that you just submit those in writing to Mr.
I'm not going to clean this up. I'll get with Matt afterwards and just give them to him.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that okay with everybody? Yep. All right. Not to cut you short. I'm sorry. All right.
You mentioned that there was talk about, or in this plan, that they would take McLean and go from a 4-lane down to a 2-lane. So you're basically coming from all the way down by 31st Street in a 4-lane. Then you get into that one section that's a block long, and you're going down to 2-lane and then going back to a 4-lane all the way up to Central. How are you going to do that, and how's safety going to be a concern and all this?
Yeah, we've had people comment on that. This has no design. It wouldn't necessarily only be that stretch. That's what the recommendation out of the plan is, kind of to be looked at the same time they redo the baseball stadium. I guess the advisory committee is recommending that stretch.
I know
with
that
no concrete plans on how to do
considered a
that.
safety corridor, isn't it, right now, for snow and getting people to and from downtown? Because I know that's right where they start the trucks, is right off of McLean, and they start plowing that first, and then they start working their way out, because that's where all the trucks are downtown. So that there's signs all along down there that it's a safety corridor, and a lot of people that travel from down south and come north. So I was just wondering about that.
Okay.
I was just trying to visualize going from a 4-lane just down to a 2 for one block, and then going back to a 4.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the part that I didn't like either, cutting it down to 4 lane, do you have a traffic count that you could tell us does the traffic actually get lower in that part?
I don't have the
What's
traffic count
north
with
and
me, but
south?
we did take a look at that, and the traffic count on that stretch is very low. The 4 lanes is
But whenever
well
I've
exceeds
been
what is
through
needed.
there, there's been other cars and other traffic that's using other lanes, and isn't that going to be one of the ways mainly to get to the ballpark? And when you have people going to the ballpark or using the parking lot itself for interest arena, there's going to be more cars there. And I don't like the idea of cutting it down to 2 lanes. That's, I don't think, is practical.
I'm wondering, I didn't see it in my packet. Did you provide us with a copy of this plan upon which we're having a public hearing here?
We sent you a link to it on the website.
That was in the agenda,
Yes, it was in the agenda item.
and the link on a PDF is not active.
Okay.
These- I don't think these PDFs are active links. Huh? You say it worked?
No, it didn't, it did not connect direct. I had to go to wichita.gov and work through it to get to it.
Yeah.
It didn't go direct to it.
Yeah, I don't know what our policy is, Dale, on having public hearings on plans that we don't have copies of, but it seems a little strange to me.
Being old school, I would agree.
These PDFs that you send they're not active PDFs. They're not searchable. You can't search for a term inside of these, which is really, gives you some consternation sometimes. We just have to live with it. But they're not active PDFs. It's been explained to me that it goes through the IT department. When it comes out of there, they're not active. You can't search them. You can't do anything except look at them. And if you want to find something in here, like today, you'd scroll through 99 pages trying to find it, which is, there's got to be a way, it seems to me, to send an active PDF, but I spent about 6 months with the staff at one point, and everybody gave up, so.
I can pass your comment along. Through our process, the only time I heard that mentioned was at the downtown Wichita meeting, but nobody in Delano has talked about that.
Question again?
My question was there any discussion about becoming an expansion of the existing SMIT or starting their own for the Delano area, which is just a self-imposed tax
Okay.
to try to do some of the things that aren't looked at. Any other questions? Well, how do we feel about taking a position on this? Oh, yeah. Well, let me ask this, though, before I do that. How do we feel about taking a position on this after we have public input, having not actually seen the printed plan? Except for Dave, who
Can
was,
we defer this until we get our?
I think it's scheduled to go to city council.
I think we had 2 members of did we not? I mean, we have one here
Cindy and
and,
I were on the committee.
yeah, okay.
Are you recommending approval?
I would recommend approval, yes.
Okay, let's go out for public comment first. Seeing a lot of people. Dave, you want to speak?
How's your pants?
Okay. What's our reporter's name?
My name is Vince Hancock, 406 South Vine. I served on the committee along with Cindy and a lot of other neighborhood leaders in the area. We really did our best to keep our ears open to the neighborhood desires for what they wanted to see 5, 10, 15 years down the road. I think there's obviously some room for wiggle. As Josh mentioned, can we really take that down to 2 lanes? It's not set in stone. It was based on traffic counts. We had 2 comments in the last couple of weeks just on public feedback as it went to DABS. One question was a gal saying, hey, with all the improvement up by the library, by River Vista, by the Catalyst site, could we maybe go down to 2 lanes all the way up to 2nd Street? There's nothing in here that says we couldn't consider that. And to me, number one, it is based on traffic counts. But then we also had a employee from Parks Department who said, just so you know, we have a lot of the Parks and Rec vehicles going up and down that stretch. There's no reason why this couldn't be an extra wide 2-lane. We're considering a completely different project outside of this. Maple's going to go to 3 lanes, center turn lane, and left and right, east and west lanes on that. So there's lots of room for finding out what does the neighborhood need. There's a very good chance that McLean could go down to 35 there, wouldn't have to go all the way down to 30. But with the possibility of having the mayor's bridge to connect from the back of Century 2 over to the ballpark, it'd be really fun to try to get people, pedestrians or bicycles, across 4 lanes of traffic, whereas if we get them across 2, it'd be a little bit safer on that. I do believe there's a lot of other aspects of the plan that no one's expressed any controversy about. If you've got any more questions, I mean, we've been looking at this draft document since January, and it's gone through 2 revisions since then. And this final, not counting typo corrections, I think it makes a lot of sense. If anybody has any questions, I'll stand for those.
Is there any consideration about just closing McLean from Douglas to?
There were requests from our neighbors next door in downtown to redirect McLean all the way over to Sycamore. The neighbors did not like that idea.
You're going to put all the same traffic in 2 lanes that you had in 4 lanes. How's that going to make it easier for getting pedestrians and bicycles across that when there's actually more traffic, more concentrated traffic?
More concentrated, but it's based on the current traffic counts and the anticipated traffic over the next 10 years. Right now, McLean is really used during rush hour, in the morning and in the evening. But at the rest of the time, you can go, as a frequent cyclist who goes across the area, I have times where I come to Maple, at the ballpark, Maple and McLean, and I sit there and I wait for the light to turn. I wait for about 30 seconds before I invoke the Kansas State dead red rule, which is there's no vehicles at the intersection at all. I have to cross on the red light because it doesn't register that my bicycle is there. There are times of the day where there's just no traffic on McLean, and other times where it's very busy, so that'd give
In
us some
that
options.
rush, those people are going to miss that ability to
Right,
travel
we don't
freely.
anticipate a lot of people going to the ballpark from 4:30 to 5:30 at night. It's going to be later than that. So, Josh?
Would you close the bridge, the mayor's bridge, if the firework display is set up then?
If it's in a fallout zone, it would have to close.
That's what I was wondering. So regardless, they're gonna have to close it down for special events and projects and all that.
Safety first. We
other
don't want
questions
anybody,
for,
that's part of, we had a guy just ask me a couple of days ago about bicycling along Douglas being so dangerous. I do it occasionally, it's not that bad. But one of the things we're hoping about with the multi-use path is to encourage the bicyclists. They'll still have a legal right to be on Douglas, to be on the sidewalks off of Douglas, but if we encourage the bicycle and pedestrian that's just there for the recreational access to go on Pearl Street, also known as Chisholm Trail Parkway, we can get them a block north of Douglas. That will make all 3 modes, bicycle, pedestrian, and motor vehicle, it'll make them all work a lot better together.
Mr. Hartman, do you have a motion?
I do have a motion. I move that we approve the plan as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hartman, second by Mr. Warren.
I have a question.
Question, discussion, more? Richardson.
A question for the staff in terms of moving forward, how do we use this plan? Will you bring this up when we have zoning cases and changes like that? I mean, this is a more detailed issue than the comprehensive plan, which we look at regularly, but it has blobs on it that don't really help us much. So how do you see this playing in the
Oh,
future?
yeah, we'll continue to use the design guidelines and the location criteria that are in there
Great,
and whatever
okay.
ultimately is included, yes.
Call for the question.
I know in the past, we would get regular updates of the plans to see what progress and so on and so forth. Are we still doing that, or, because we passed this plan, but then, it may come up if something comes up for us to look at, but actually, the progress of the plan, I know Dave Barber at one time, we were reviewing, because we have all these neighborhood plans, and he would give us an update on.
I think that was when Dave had a lot more time than what we have now with the staff that we have.
Okay.
We had a motion down here to call the question, I believe.
Yes.
So we'll vote on the call. All in favor of calling the question, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Now we're back to the question. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. There you go. Meeting's adjourned, I think.